Hello, welcome to News Center. I'm Parikshitl. The top corporate story we are tracking this evening. India's top telecom operators, Jio Platforms and Airtel, have joined hands with Elon Musk's SpaceX to introduce Starlink internet services in India. Jio Platforms has proposed to offer Starlink solutions through its online and retail stores. Other than equipment, Jio also expressed willingness to provide installation, activation and customer support solutions to Starlink. Similarly, Airtel has proposed to offer Starlink equipment in its stores. Airtel has also proposed to explore how Starlink can use its network. Does Starlink make sense for India? The latest data by TRAI reveals that tele-density in urban India is at 131%, but for rural India, this number dropped to just 58%. For internet penetration, the number of those connected is pegged at 944 million. However, there are three regulatory hurdles that Starlink will need to cross. There are a few regulatory hurdles as well. The government has maintained that Starlink is yet to address security issues. Officials are open to granting a license after the security concerns are met. Starlink also requires authorization from space regulator InSpace. While it's in advanced stages, few issues still remain. Joining us now to take this forward are Akhilesh Tuteja, partner and national leader of technology, media and telecommunications at KPMG, and Varun Gupta, senior analyst at Counterpoint Research. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Let me go across to Akhilesh first. Akhilesh, when it comes to the tie-ups, the MOUs that both Jio and Airtel have signed with SpaceX, how are they different in terms of providing services to customers on the ground, bringing Starlink to India, and also helping them in installing Starlink's platforms, such as their dish or their Wi-Fi router at customers' locations across the country?
Thank you so much, Parikshit. First of all, there is very little information available which one can really say is credible about a lot of things. But yes, the good news is that Starlink is going to be available in India, subject to all the clearances which you just talked about. And this kind of partnership allows us as a country to also propel forward, because when you have such two large platform and network providers like Airtel and Jio partnering with such an interesting technology like Starlink, it creates a lot of possibilities. So unlike any other player who would come into the market, set up the network, and will take time, I think this clearly gives a head start to Starlink to go accelerated path very soon. The key driver being that such a kind of satellite connectivity is required for a country like India to reach places where the traditional network cannot reach. I think we need a partnership which allows us to grow faster and get all the results soon. So I'm excited about it. And as you said, that this partnership allows Airtel and Jio Platform to market, sell, service, and also install these customer equipment so that we can get the results faster.
All right. I would also like to ask you about how this really boosts our digital ecosystem. One thing is that this is satellite-based broadband, so you have consistent speeds, and they can also support internet connectivity at the remotest corners of the country. So does this really help in improving our internet penetration?
Absolutely, it does. While it's a less understood fact that half of the world isn't really connected by the classic broadband connection. India is no different. We also have a fair bit of coverage left. Now, most of the broadband connection is much easier to do in dense cities and towns and all that, where lots of people live. But there are places where we do need network connectivity, but the tele-density is so low, it isn't really viable to set up classic networks in those places. So what a satellite type of technology allows, it allows us to reach every part of Earth and therefore every part of our country, which makes it transformational, because unlike the traditional network or the wired network, which I would say, you got to take time to lay cables, get there and provide connectivity. Here it is typically you just switch on and you're connected. So that's the one thing. I wouldn't really yet say that this is going to be the fastest and the best way to connect, because one is that the equipment cost is very different from the traditional broadband wireless and wired broadband connection. And also, it has a very different type of threshold when it comes to connectivity speed. The traditional satellite, prior to this low Earth satellite which you're talking about, those traditional satellites suffered from the latency, which means that the wired network was faster or the broadband was faster if we looked at the classical satellites. But this Starlink and these kind of satellites which operate in low Earth orbit, they are actually much closer to Earth. They're much, much closer to Earth than the other satellite. And therefore, the time it takes for the data packet to go from Earth to the satellite and come back is much faster. But the second thing, which is actually quite...
Right. I'm going to come back to you very shortly, Akhilesh, but let me also go across to Varun Gupta at this point. Varun, how do you think this impacts competition in the Indian broadband space, especially with fiber broadband? Also in terms of pricing, the pricing of Starlink is likely to be higher than fiber services already available in the country. Could you give us some examples and the comparison?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Parikshit. So I think in terms of the competition, if we talk about the fiber and the FWA space, which is currently the hot topic in the country right now, so we see that it won't affect the classical broadband connections or the classical broadband techniques, because those are designed to give the broadband connections to the urban areas which have the higher tele density. However, this satellite broadband is more suited towards remote network areas, especially in the northern parts of our country and the northeastern parts of our country, where there is a upgrowing and upcoming a growing business economy. Small and medium businesses are also coming up over there, and there's a large user base after COVID that has moved to their hometowns, and they are doing their work from home over there, which will require this higher connectivity to do their businesses. And in terms of pricing, yes, I would agree that it could be slightly higher, because the cost of equipment right now, of course, it is as compared to the classical broadband connections of fiber and FWA, it will be higher than that, because it involves a dish antenna as well as a higher grade router with a higher antenna and higher gain RFFE system. So that would be costly. However, it would be good to see that how these operators will manage to subsidize this pricing. And we had a very similar chat with the FWA as well. Over there, the cost of that equipment was very high. However, Jio was able to subsidize that along in their pricing. And we would also like to see that how Jio and Airtel would like to subsidize this equipment cost within the planned pricing, because that will be crucial for this satellite broadband to propagate further. Otherwise, the consumers won't actually accept that if it is very high priced.
Right, that's an important point. Let me go back to Akhilesh at this point. Akhilesh, there are clear regulatory hurdles which need to be crossed, and both the press releases from Jio and Airtel say that this MOU, the implementation is subject to SpaceX getting authorization in the US to provide satellite-based services in India as well. Considering all of this happens, how much time do you expect for Starlink services to actually reach India? And what's going to be the cost to Airtel and Jio for subsidizing such services, as Varun is also pointing out?
You pointed a hard question at me. It's very hard to determine the exact time frame. But I would say that there is a desire to kind of get it done faster. And we all know the situation right now in the US and in India is getting more and more friendlier. So from that perspective, I would think it should be faster than what it would have been otherwise. But clearly, these clearances require several considerations. There are considerations around security, because as we have seen with any large-scale new technology which gets developed in markets like US, they would like to have the ability to manage and control in terms of how it gets used in other parts of the world. Satellite as technology is far pervasive. It is one of the most powerful technologies available, and therefore I think those considerations will come. And then the third one is also about this whole thing about how does it interconnect with the regulatory ecosystem in India as well as US. So those are the considerations, but I'm hopeful. When it comes to cost, it is going to be not so significant in my view, because while the equipment costs much more right now, but over time, it is likely to get significantly lower as the scale increases, not just in India and other parts of the world. And one of the things which I do want to highlight, very interesting about the Starlink technology, is in the past, even the satellite communication required the data to jump back to the Earth station. And the new technology Starlink allows it to have satellite-to-satellite communication. And therefore, you are able to reach with lower latency, high data transfer rate, and also relatively lower cost. So this is definitely a better and much improved situation from what we have seen in the SATCOM before.
Right. And Varun, coming to you, what does this really mean for the Indian consumer in terms of the options that he will have available in the India market? And how will this be a compelling offering to the Indian consumer?
Right. So I think in terms of the offering, definitely for the Indian consumer, it is going to be a plethora of option now. Now we have fiber, fixed wireless access, and hopefully in future the satellite broadband. So in that matter, it will be increasing the competition, and that will definitely reduce the cost of acquisition as well as the cost of plan to the consumer. And one interesting point I want to highlight over here is that with this partnership with Jio and Airtel, Starlink will be able to offer this satellite broadband connectivity at par with the fiber and FWA offerings. That is the bundling of OTT services with the hybrid set-top boxes that these players are already doing with the other services. So in that matter, it makes the offering very compelling to the Indian consumers, because now they will have equal options of getting a satellite connection or a fiber or a FWA connection. And definitely, as Sir mentioned, that it is the latency has come down, so the performance has also increased for the satellite broadband connectivity, and this will help the user to go for the right choice for their offering.
Right. Akhilesh, my final question to you. Now, when we look at the competition in this space, there is, of course, competition from OneWeb, which has a tie-up with Airtel, Amazon, Uxnet, Viasat. How do you think the space is going to evolve in the next few months? And for the success of this venture, what are some of the facts that will be actually necessary? And when we speak about high-speed internet, how is the consumer going to benefit over the plans already available in the India market?
Sure. So the first good news is that there are more players in SATCOM than what we have ever seen before. So when I see more choices, it allows us to have more power in the hands of consumer, relatively low cost services, flexibility, and also the speed of growth of innovation. As I mentioned earlier, that the old technologies like Inmarsat and others, where it used to connect a phone to the satellite, it's very different. So it's connecting to a CPE or customer equipment to the internet, which kind of changes the game substantially in terms of allowing multiple access. Also, as I mentioned, that this new Starlink has the ability to do satellite-to-satellite laser-based communication. I think many other companies will catch up to that, and they will even take it further. So to me, like any other industry which is in a growth stage, it is important to have more players, more choices, and which is what we are seeing here. And therefore, I see this competition as a positive move. When it comes to for the consumer, I think right now my hope will be that it allows us to do things which we have not been able to do before, which is basically taking us to uncovered areas. So that would be my first desire, hope, and thing. And then to the other urban users like us, I think it will provide a very different level of connectivity, but that's not something which I'm looking at in tomorrow morning, short-term kind of thing. But that will also happen and will provide a lot more different use cases than what we have seen here before, providing us much deeper penetration and connectivity at a very different price point and with different kind of technologies.
Right. Akhilesh Suteja, thank you very much for joining us, and Varun Gupta as well. We take a break at this point, but lots more on the other side. US tariffs on steel and aluminium exports come into effect from today. China has vowed to take all necessary actions in retaliation. Let's see what happens in the days to come. We will be speaking to Jonathan Cheng, the China Bureau Chief at the Wall Street Journal, up next.